afternoon, everybody. How wonderful to be back again in this space. How wonderful to see many new faces, some old friends. And Sergio, thank you for those beautiful words. And I have to say that for me, it's a very special moment today. I know everybody always says that at the beginning of every speech, but it is because in the family, my father, myself, and you'll hear we've dedicated our lives to fight for life, for diversity. But it's always somebody talks or with me or with my father. This is the first time they were put together to talk about our family legacy and what it is that drives us through the generations in this commitment. It's the first time. So for me, it's a very special context, and I want to thank you, Sergio, for that sensibility and invitation. You're very, very kind. Of course, my father will do most of the talking. And well, he has more decades under his belt. But it's a long story, and we're short of time. And I know it is after lunch, it's the killer hour, but I see everybody super attentive here. And if I see that we're losing, I just put the microphone closer. And then I get everybody on board. But without further delay, thank you so much, everybody, for being here, for paying attention, to public for the amazing work, and Sergio. And I'll pass the word to my father. You know, I'm just going to put it straightforward. We kind of started in three blocks. What's our origins, what's our impact, and what's next? So, Dad, and it's funny, I'm so used to calling him Martin because we work together. I just feel awkward in public saying, hey, Dad. But, Dad, people talk about families and family legacies. Why don't you just give everybody, in a nutshell, a bit? Because the family legacy doesn't start with you or me. There is a further story. There is a legacy of values and principles. Can you tell us a bit about where does this legacy come from and how did it impact you?
Thank you, Pacho, and thank everybody for being here and for listening. Yes, it goes back. It goes back, and it can go back quite a while. But I'll just go back to my parents and my grandparents a little bit. And just mention a few things when you say a question of values. My grandfather was a philosopher in Germany, in Munich, and he was one of the first people that in 1923, as a philosopher at the university, he stood up against fascism and he stood up against the Nazis. And he started publishing, and he became an important enemy for the Nazis. They went to his house, they stoned, they threw stones and everything. And then he had to leave Germany in 1933. My father and my grandfather and my grandmother were all condemned to death. They managed to get away. They kept going, publishing newspapers in favor of the Jewish people and against fascism. They had to go to Austria then. He started a newspaper in Austria. From Austria, they had to, in 1938, they had to go to France. And France was then occupied in 1940. And so they had to get out, and they came to the States. I was born here in Manhattan in St. Vincent's Hospital. On the other side, on my mother's side, which is equally important, not only because she's my mother, but also equally important because she was Irish. And they stood up against, obviously, they stood up against the British colonialism. And she was brought up, and my grandfather, twice, he was a judge in the Irish tradition, the Celtic tradition. And for that, twice he was put in jail, and he spent a year and he got out in hunger strikes. Why do I say this is important? Because I was brought up, and I was brought up among the Irish, and I was brought up the Germans, fight for the underdog, stand up for people, stand up for the rights of people, stand up for the people that have a right to their land, they have the right to be different, they have the right to have respect, no? And that, I was brought up in that world, not that conscious. My father then was here. We lived several years. I left when I was 5 years old. He went to Columbia and started a university there, the University of the Andes, and where I was brought up in Columbia. But it's just to give a background there. And then there I met a very, very famous philosopher, anthropologist, Rahel Dolmatov. I married his daughter, and your mother. And so there's the next step. So that's the next step. But anyway, so I want to highlight that it's interesting because one lives, and as I went into the Amazon, because one lives according to one's values, one has something inside, one has a drive inside, one has something that takes you along. Sometimes I even say life thinks me, because you have something in you that brings you there. You find a cause because you have values, because you have ideals, because there's something in you. And that helps you to find a cause. I guess it happens to all of us in different contexts. So I got involved with the indigenous people. Back it was 1971, I decided, my adventure, I was 28 or something like that, I decided to row across the Amazon on my own in a canoe. And I went down for 6 months rowing across the Amazon, and it was fantastic. These people in their tradition, in their culture, I couldn't speak any of the languages. I went through 7 different ethnic groups. I couldn't speak the languages. They couldn't speak mine. And we just smiled at each other, and we just held hands, and we just got along, and we just were together without talking much. And this, when I was halfway through, I came to a place where they're still being exploited by rubber merchants, by rubber barons, or what we used to call them. And there was also a problem of the missionary going in, right or wrong. I'm not questioning and not judging, but they had a mandate, convert them to Christianity. And this, of course, undermined the culture of these people. So I said I'd come back for a couple of years and give them a hand, see what we can do. So at least they would be choosing. At least they could say, I want to go one way or the other. At least they would have some rights recognized. They had no rights recognized whatsoever. And they were basically like slaves. I mean, they were in debt. Their grandparents had always been in debt, and they were always working for these people. And so I came back, and I started talking to them about 3 things. Land rights, the right that you have your territory, which they didn't have. Rights to be different, right to be a culture, right to maintain your identity, to be yourself, and the right to set up your own government in relation to the state, but an own government where you can make your decisions and you can run the show yourself. And I thought we could start that in 2 years. It wasn't easy when I started about land. And I said, no, we must find a document saying this land is yours. And he said, but the land isn't ours. The land belongs to the birds. The land belongs to the trees. The land belongs to the spirit. We belong to the land. The land doesn't belong to us. I said, yes, but there are other people that don't think like that. And they consulted with the spirits through the rituals and everything and they asked the spirits, who does the land belong to? And the spirit said, the land belongs to the spirits. So, but that the spirit said, but since Martin says that we have to get a piece of paper, and Martin's white, tell Martin to go get a piece of paper. So at that already, I started with the stream, all this belongs to the indigenous people, let's go for 20 million hectares. 20 million hectares is 3 departments, it's enormous. I don't know what I can compare it to.
I'll read up on that. Yeah.
Okay, you'll pick up on that. But what's interesting in life, for me, is that I didn't really know where I was going. I didn't know what it really meant to get the land. I didn't know if it was difficult or not or easy. Sometimes when you don't really understand, you jump and you take a risk. And then you discover as you walk. And then you start finding. And then life is good to me. And I ran into the right people at the right moment. And they opened the doors. Presidents of Colombia, specialists, I would meet them and I tell my story. Because when I was with the Indians, this happened for the first time, just to give a quick example, a quick little bit of story. When I came to the first tribe, to the first group, and they said to me, the ones that already spoke a bit of Spanish, what tribe do you come from? Being half Irish, half German, I said, well, I'm Celtic. So, why not? Why not? And what is it like where your parents live? And I said, well, there's a time when it gets cold and the leaves come off the trees and everything gets cold. And there's a time when spring comes back and everything comes back. And why is that? And I took a stick and I drew the sun on the ground and then I drew the earth going around. And they listened to me patiently. And when I finished, I said, that's what you white people call an explanation, right? Don't you have a story? So I told them a Greek myth of Persephone, the kidnapping of Persephone. And the kidnapping of Persephone, and then they were very pleased. And with the story, they liked it. And I understood there at that moment, telling stories is so important. And I think that I've come all this way telling stories, and my whole anthropology, I did a doctorate in anthropology, telling them stories, and they were telling me stories. And through stories we went telling, and we tried to understand each other, or try to inspire each other. I don't say if we understood each other. But then I went in for 2 years, and they became 50. So I was looking for the land. I thought I could do it in 10 years. It took us 20 years to get the land, to get their rights also, back up to the 90s. Then to set up governments. Then I thought I could do it in 10 years. It has taken us 33. I got involved for about half of that time. And for the last 15 years, Pacho has been running this. Pacho, I had also the idea for my children to feel the forest. It's great to get out of our culture, to step away, to go into another world. There are different ways of being a human being. There are different ways of relating to nature. There are different ways. And so Pacho went, and he went through all the rituals, initiation rituals. He was brought up there. And so he really got it into his spirit, you know? And his grandfather being an anthropologist, and then his father being myself. And so, anyway, so the story went like that we got the land, then we got all these 26 million hectares. We got all their rights recognized in the International Constitution. It took us 20 years, and I thought we'd get the government in 10 years. We're still 30 years pulling this together, and you're completing it. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, good. Oh. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, difficult here to recap. I think that, I mean, the way I feel it, the way that I live it, is that there's definitely a set of values and principles and a way of addressing life, the way of seeing and understanding life. Our family has a very long history. You can trace it back to the Middle Ages and the Knights Templars and whatnot. And money and power has come and gone through wars and moments and everything. But one thing that has been constant through generations for some reason is this very strong attachment to a certain worldview and way of seeing a life, and of attaching to some values and principles on daring to think different, on believing in the infinite power that diversity has. It's not believing. I mean, diversity is the true engine of innovation. It is by putting different languages and cultures in conversation that we're truly capitalizing the genius of humanity expressed in so many cultures and languages. That is the way forward. It is through diversity. It is through dialogue between differences that we find a new path. And I think this has driven the family through different generations and different moments and different times. Again, wars, we've been through all the wars, we've had everything, we've lost everything, but these values and principles have driven us and to engage and again have impact in the lives that we're doing. I think that's an important thing to have in mind when we talk about legacies and when we talk about what we're doing, both in the families and our entourage. When it comes then to the work and impact, I mean, Martin is very humble about it, but I mean, Jesus, under his leadership, working with the Colombian government, he got 25 million hectares protected. That is the largest continuous indigenous territory in the world. That is an area the size of the United Kingdom. Within those 25 million hectares, so there were three big dreams, or not three big commitments, that I ended up somehow messed up into that. It was rights, lands, governments. So under my father's leadership, rights and lands got through. Under my leadership, indigenous governments. So right now we're accompanying indigenous governments over 18 million hectares. That's an area twice the size of Portugal. So imagine setting up all the political representation, administrative capacities, public health, public education, value chains, local, the whole package, everything, with 62 different ethnic groups in remote territories of the Amazon rainforest, and building it from an intercultural approach where you're really putting cultural diversity into conversation to innovate the new paradigms of social and economic well-being. But we haven't stopped there. We have gone into this regional action. And in a moment, I'll ask you that to talk more about from your current role with the more multilateral side. I'll talk more about the civil society and private sector side. The Amazon works as a single connected ecosystem. And Seth was mentioning the flying river. So trees produce clouds. Trees are cloud factories. I think maybe that's what they call it, a rainforest. Not because it rains, but because the forest produces rain. They are literally cloud factories. Between 1,000 and 10,000 liters of rainfall water per day is produced per tree in the Amazon. You multiply that by gazillions, and you have more water being carried by the trees through this cloud system, these flying rivers, than all the rivers of the Amazon combined. 70% of the water of South America, 50 Central America, 25% North America depends on this Amazon flying river. That's the water you're drinking here. That's 70% of the water that waters the agriculture in your countries and in your companies. Everybody depends. That's one of every two jobs. We are also intrinsically, directly dependent on this Amazon flying river. We think of the Amazon as something over there, but we literally have it in our homes, in our companies, and right here. So we've engaged in protecting this flying river with our partners, civil society, indigenous organizations, scaling up high-impact solutions in the Northern Amazon, and together, between us and our partners, we've protected over 100 million hectares. That is 4 times the size of France. And we're aiming, thank you, and we are aiming by 2030 to secure this connectivity along 200 million hectares in the Northern Amazon, so that both biodiversity, cultures, strong indigenous cultures, and thriving communities equals healthy forests. Healthy forests equals healthy flying rivers. Healthy flying rivers equals resilient economies. So this is a task for all. But I'm kind of jumping ahead on next steps. So I was just recapping a bit on these values and principles that have driven us and on the impacts that we've gotten to date. Why don't you share with us a bit where you're at right now with the multilateral? I honestly don't get it. Just before you jump in. So a couple of years ago, we were in my house, and the governments of the Amazon Basin decided to really reboot the multilateral entity to address common challenges around the Amazon. And the president of Colombia calls Martin and says, Martin, would you be interested? And he goes like, well, I'm finishing my book. I'm kind of like, let me think what I can recommend. And I wake up in the morning and I go, and he's sitting exactly in the same spot that I left him the night before. And I said, Pacho, I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't sleep. I mean, I have a commitment. I have a commitment with the Amazon, and I cannot not go through with it. 82 years old, picks up the phone, takes on the job, and he's leading 8 countries. And that's amazing. So tell us a bit about that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, it has to do with what you were saying, that we are committed to protect the rainforest, and we're committed to work with indigenous people. And as a great commitment, it really has been a privilege in my life to be able to work with these indigenous people. And my life has been a big privilege in my life to be at my age now and to see a dream that was started 50 years ago and it's come true. It's happening. It's working. And that is an enormous privilege. And why do things work? A guardian angel? I don't know. The doors opened. Could have been the shamans that were putting positive energy towards this, but the doors opened. Or perhaps a commitment, simply because you're committed for a cause and you're trying to do, hopefully, the right thing, what you believe the right thing, and the doors opened. We moved along, and what Pacho was saying a moment ago, we worked with civil society, we worked with indigenous people, but we always had a bit of an obstacle. And the obstacles, unfortunately, were the countries. And the Amazon is divided in 8 countries. You have borders, you have different types of governments, you have different ways of seeing this. And so to get this continuity across the borders, and to get the ecosystem connected, to get the indigenous people that go on different sides of the border, how can you bring this together? And when I was asked to take on this job, I honestly thought at the beginning, I said, God, I know these people, these governments, and God, it's not easy. But then I said, I have to take it on. They asked me to do it, and I must. So I took on the challenge. And now what we are pushing, so it's the 8 countries of the Amazon. There are 9 actually, but France has a little piece. And they are not included in the Amazon 8 countries, the agreement they have. And this agreement now is extremely important because we have an organization that can coordinate the 8 countries. That in itself is important. We have got the governments to agree on fundamental policies of protecting the rainforest, of respecting indigenous people, of working on sustainable development. We got them lined up, that is. Now to make, of course, as we know, once agreements exist, how to make it happen. We're coming up to COP30 on climate right now, but we are moving along those lines. One of the main challenges is that from the 8 countries, we can understand that it's a bioma, it's an ecosystem, it's a large system for us, and not the back garden or the back patio of the 8 countries. Not something that's sort of lost over there because there aren't very many people, there's not many votes, there's not much money. So it's sort of the backyard of these countries. Instead of being a system, which we need, as Patrick was saying, because it produces water, because it produces diversity, because it produces resilience, because it keeps the temperature of the planet 2 degrees lower. The importance of this, we lose this, we'll go up 2 degrees in the planet. We'll have all the tipping points of all the other tipping points of the Antarctica, of the flows of the northern river, the northern ocean. We'll have a lot of complex situations, and we'll lose the water for Latin America, South America, and partly for the United States. So it is extremely important, but it's not that easy to get governments interested because they want it to be money. They wanted to make money out of it, as if it wasn't enough that we already have the water and the resilience and all this from the rainforest. So that's my challenge right now, to coordinate 8 countries, to coordinate 8 foreign affairs, which is even more difficult than 8 countries, and since all the decisions are unanimous, it's not that easy. But we're getting there. We're moving along. We have good people. There are excellent people out there that think well and that are putting their ideas across. And I believe that we can get there. I believe that it's been difficult in many questions, in many situations, and we've got there. So I believe in this case we'll also be able to protect the rainforest, and we'll be able. So that's my bet.
Thank you. And thank you, so kind. And we're kind of running over time right now, but so, yeah, I mean, definitely, we need a mindset shift. We need to understand that nature is a source and not a resource for social and economic well-being. We need to understand that nature is directly connected in no matter what entrepreneurial engagement you're in or where you're living. I mean, I gave you the example of the Amazon flying river, no? And truly, our social and economic security depends on nature. Nature is not just a conversation about climate. It is a conversation about human and economic security. And we're doing, as you hear or you heard already, in general terms, both from the multilateral and government side, which is much more my father's engagement right now. I'm more engaged with the civil society, communities, and private sector, innovative finance, looking at nature as an asset class, how to consolidate the Amazon flying river as a new asset in and by itself. We're working with the former vice president of the IMF and the top leaders worldwide in valuing and looking at these innovative financial things, if anybody is interested, of course. And more on the family side, not so much on the work side, on the NGO side and on the multilateral side, but on the family side, we've created this special program that aims to connect people who want to see change happen with those making change happen. We've been at it, obviously, for quite a while, and we know the landscape. We know what's working. We know where are the priorities. If anybody is interested in finding out more, please do get in touch with us, or Jade. If Jade is around, if you can just stand up here. If anybody is interested in following up more with us, please do leave your contact with Jade or with Martin or me. And we could keep on talking forever. And I love all this attention and all these smiles. And I hope this is inspiring. But it's about the 4th time that Sergio is saying, Pacho! So thank you so much for your attention and have a great afternoon.